beach is my recreation. I'm down here every day, pretty much in the morning with my mates. So for me, this is where I meet my friends and have done for probably 20 years now.
The shape of our coastline is what we call a log spiral curve or a zeta curve. It's typical of the southeastern coastline of Australia, and it's formed that way by the predominant southeasterly wave direction, which is pushing sand generally to the north, particularly the northern New South Wales, southern Queensland coastline. And as a result, when it hits a headland, you get more of a cut-in just to the north of the headland, which then creates that nice gentle curve that we see on our Gold Coast beaches and certainly the beaches to the south.
Sand's heading up the coast from New South Wales. It gets pushed around Snapper Rocks, either by the storm events, during any moderate wave events, sand will be moving around the corner, or when there's sand pumping going on, and from there on, gets gradually pushed up along the coast, depending on the energy behind it.
We have an amazing amount of sand movement. You know, even when the surf's small, there's still lots of sand moving through. I mean, on an average, I think we average about 500,000 cubic metres a year moving north naturally, which is a lot of sand.
The swell direction is really important for the way that sand moves up the Gold Coast, and that's especially important here at Kirra. Because of the orientation of the bay here, swell needs to come anywhere from east all the way to north to actually mobilise the sand out of this compartment. For a long time, you can have no movement of sand at all, and then with one big storm, you can have a large volume of sand moving up the coast in a big lump. And it's this irregular movement of sand up the Gold Coast which really affects the surf quality at both our beach breaks and our points.
The open beach breaks of the Gold Coast are generally defined as being intermediate in nature, and that they're characteristic of plunging wave types, dynamic sandbar formations, and an array of complex coastal processes. So the dominant bar formations we have are your longshore double bar system, consisting of an outer bar, an inner trough or gutter, and an inner bar.
The ideal sandbanks at the point generally depend on the time of year you're talking about. From spring to early summer, when the waves are smaller, the sand tends to hug the point, which is good in a way because it maximises the smaller conditions that we have. The waves aren't slowed down on the outer bank and there's no gutter, so that any swell that we do have is maximised and the length of ride is increased. Whereas in late summer and autumn, when the coral sea is more active, we have more high energy swells moving sand around Tallebudgera. So in essence, once the creek is filled and there's more energy in the waves, sand can be mobilised around Tallebudgera Groin more effectively, creating an offshore bar offset from Burleigh Headland, maximising wave potential and wave length of ride.
In recent years, we've had a few strong storms close to each other, and we're seeing some of the results of that storminess on the beaches at the moment.
After a major storm, with this erosion of our beach and our dune system, that sand is primarily deposited in what we call the storm bar, which is out in 6 to 8 metres of water, and that's nature's way, I guess, of protecting itself. The storm bar then dissipates further wave energy as the storm develops, and then the process of recovery of the beach is that storm bar gradually moving on shore under the calmer wave conditions. So we haven't lost the sand. It's basically been moved offshore and then it comes back onshore.
So there's a number of factors that go into the variability of the sandbanks here on the Gold Coast. It's not only the sand itself, which is essentially the foundation for the banks, but there's other influencing factors such as wave height, wave period, wave direction, winds, tides. All these things come into play to produce our high quality beach breaks that we have up and down the Gold Coast.
In 1962, when they extended the entrance to the Tweed River, that changed things forever here, really, because it deflected the sand flow, the natural sand flow. It deprived the southern points of sand, and then in 1967, when we got Cyclone Dinah, it just wreaked havoc. You know, it was major erosion. You know, all the sand got scoured out from the entire length and breadth of the Gold Coast. The lifeblood of the Gold Coast was sand, and it's been a constant battle to replenish the sand and keep the sand on the beaches.
Erosion has worried me before. Certain storms can really come in and impact against the Gold Coast shoreline. Whether that happens naturally or they do dredging to return that sand, the beaches always come back.
We've got lots of annual programs to help maintain beach profiles. One of them is the Tullabudgera Creek and also Currumbin Creek dredging campaigns. Sand that actually gets pushed into those estuaries can actually form bars or clog those outlets to the creeks. So we actually have a dredging campaign to actually take that sand from the estuaries onto the beaches. Council has an annual budget for the construction of public seawalls. We're actually concentrating in the Miami area, and we intend to build approximately 400 metres of seawall to protect the public infrastructure in that area.
Back in the early 60s, those rock training walls were extended out seaward, and by virtue of that it cut off the sand supply, which moves from south to north. And there was over 7 million cubic metres of sand accumulated on the southern side of those training walls, which is Letitia Beach. And as a result, all of the southern Gold Coast beaches were starved of sand and didn't get their natural supply, and we had a really serious erosion problem through the 70s and 80s and 90s. And ultimately, to solve that problem, this system was built, a fixed bypass system whereby the sand is captured as it moves north along the sandbar there, and then it's captured by the jetty, delivered to a pump station at the landward end of the jetty, pumped under the river, and then there's 4 outlets along the southern Gold Coast beaches here where that sand is then released back into the natural environment.
Nature is moving sand from south to north, and what we simply want to do is intercept that flow of sand and bypass the segment of the coast where we're interested in maintaining navigational safety, the seaway, and restore that flow on the other side of the seaway. So we'll intercept that sand, pick that sand up as nature delivers it, and deliver it to the northern side of the seaway where it can continue its journey up the coast.
Council is undertaking a range of activities in partnership with the state government. We're actually taking sand through a dredging campaign from the Broadwater and depositing it on the spit as a stockpile so it can be used on Surfers Paradise Beach as required to improve safety and beach amenity. The Kira Point groin is a council project. We're actually extending the groin back to its original length.
Kira was such a spectacle. It would bring people here just to watch this spectacle of guys getting 10 to 15, 20-second barrels. Look, all we know is that when it was at the original length of the groin, it worked. Like 80% of the community want Kira back to its former glory.
You know, I'm a proud Gold Coaster. I love living here, and I love having my family brought up here, and I want to, you know, keep this beach part of my lifestyle for as long as I'm alive.
When the beaches are healthy, tourism booms, and when tourism booms, so too does the Gold Coast.
We're very well known for our stretch of coastline and how well maintained and how beautiful our beaches are.
Healthy beaches, healthy economy.